Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Last week we took this little Japanese crankbait made by Daiwa. It's called a Crosswake, and we did everything it takes to be able to make exact copies. We studied how it behaved in the water. We found the weight of it without the hooks. We weighed it suspended in water to figure out what the volume is, and then I floated it to see how it sits on the surface. Then I found the center of gravity. And finally, we made a silicone mold. With that done, it was time to pour our first one out of some casting resin. And the results were perfect. And it was time to move on to the next step. And this week, I'm gonna have to confess about the screw up I made on our very first lure. This very first lure out of the mold that I thought we had perfect, I screwed it up. Let me show you why. This lure, with its hooks, is supposed to weigh right at or just below 15 grams. And we've got 15.86. When I calculated how much weight I could add to it without going over, I forgot to include the hooks. So I ended up adding just a little more weight than we could use. That means that when I floated in the water with the hooks on it, the lure sinks. Slowly, but it sinks. Luckily, since we still have our original casting, which has no hardware in it at all, we can recover from this pretty easily. I can just put this on the scale and then start adding elements that have to go in. There's our wire harness, here are our hooks, and this is the weight shift chamber. And there we are, 14.69. That should do it perfectly. I shouldn't have to add anything else to this to make it float like the original and hopefully have the same action. So let's go ahead and make this casting. So I just need to set the UV resin that I'm using to glue on the weight shift chamber. Now I can just take the assembly and put it in our silicone mold, drop the other half on it, put it in our mold holder, Velcro, strap it together, and we're ready to pour this guy. And I'm using my normal blend, so that's 6 grams of part A and then 1.2 grams of micro balloons. And I stir up those two parts until they're nicely blended. And then we can add part B, 6 grams again. And then it's just time to stir quickly because this stuff sets fast. We can pour it into the mold as soon as it's well mixed. And now it's just a matter of waiting for it to set. Alright, so while this sets up, I want to talk about another little element I didn't talk about last time, and it might be something you guys thought that I overlooked and wasn't going to cover, but I'm definitely going to cover it. When you get a factory-made lure like this, it usually has 3D eyes. Some of them have painted on eyes, and some of them have little sticker eyes, but most of them have these 3D eyes that stick out a little bit, so that when you make your casting, you end up with a little ball sticking out. And you could paint this ball. That usually doesn't come out that great. It's a little difficult to make it look good. So there's a couple things you can do. First, you could sort of pluck out these eyes and then hopefully you can glue them back on. But I don't like to take that risk. I like to try to save the lure. Or you could take a sharp knife and sort of just scrape off that ball. A sharp X-Acto knife is what you want to use. And this way you can replace that eye with a really similar one and not have any other work to do. Or you can do what I usually like to do, which is make the eye just a little bigger. So I'll take a little Forstner bit. This is a 1/4 inch. I'll center it on the original eyeball, usually after I've flattened it out. And I'll cut myself a new eye socket, which allows for a slightly larger eye, which I kind of prefer. Let me know what you guys would do. I do want to get these things painted, and I want to try to mimic this as closely as possible. So I've got a whole new set of airbrush paints, and yeah, these were sent to me, but no strings attached. They just said, try them out, see what you think. We're going to do that. I've got a bunch of old Createx paints that are both old and not very good paints, and I really want to have something I can replace them with. Hopefully this will be it. All right, this thing should be ready to go. Feels good and hard. All right, vents are working good. I'm gonna clean this stuff up and we are going to throw it in the water tank and see if our weight calculation is right. All right, here we go. Perfect. It's exactly what we want. Let's force it under a little bit. Nice. That's exactly the level we wanted it at. Tail down just a little tiny bit. Now I am going to continue to cast a few more of these, and for each one I have to make a harness with its chamber on it. So I'm slowly making some small adjustments just so I get what I want in the end here. So if you look here, what I've done is made it so the back end of this little chamber is high. This way when the lure stops, it has a better chance for the balls to go up and get stuck to the magnet. And since that's how this weight shift is going to work, it has to be stuck to the magnet just before you cast it, so that when you cast it, it shoots out of the back. All right, now I got to glue it back together. That's to be expected. It isn't intended to be shot out like that without being surrounded by resin, which is what it is when it's inside the lure. So inside the lure, it doesn't go anywhere. All right, let's keep making lures. So now I want to make a hollow lure, and to do that, we're going to need this contraption. All right, and we'll just put it over here, and I'll show you how this thing works. With the power supply plugged in, I just set it to about 12 volts. That'll do it. And now I can turn the motor on and turn up the speed. And I'm going to run it slow so you can see what's happening here. You've got the outer frame spinning in this axis, and then the inner frame spinning on the other axis. And we can get it going just a little faster, but really with a viscous material in there like resin, you want it to spin pretty much as slow as you can get it to. Since the idea of making one of these things in the Roto-Caster is to have a hollow lure, kind of like this one, with some BBs in it, I'm going to use an internal harness only with weights, not with any kind of rattle or anything. The idea is to leave plenty of room inside the body for the BBs and to keep the weight well forward, because the BBs are going to sit kind of in the center. So we need to reestablish our weight. So this is showing 720 without the lure body, but we know we're only going to use half the amount of the resin, so it'll be half the weight of the body, and the body weight about 8.6, 8.7. So we need to add half of that to this. So let's say 4.3. So we'll call that 11.5 grams for the body, the hooks, and the internal weights. And we want it around 14.5 grams. So we can put about 4 grams of BBs in there. There you go. That should do it. So these are going to be the BBs that we put inside the lure to make it rattle. For this mix, since I'm already going to have a hollow spot in the middle, I don't really need to add any micro balloons to make it light. So I'm just going to use a straight up mix of this casting resin, but I only need to mix half. And the key here is to mix it quickly, pour it in, close everything up, and head straight over to the machine. Now I need to put something in the sprue to keep it all from leaking out. And we run over here, try not to waste too much time here. Close our clamps down and get this thing going. All right, now it's just a matter of waiting about 15 to 20 minutes. All right, I think it's been long enough. Here we go, looking good. A couple little bubbles, but nothing horrible. And definitely can hear it's hollow. We have a little hole there to push our BBs through. All right, so before we put the BBs in there, we need to widen this hole just a little bit. There you go. And there you can see the wall thickness in there. So I hope you can see the hollowness, and on the inside you can see that the head is solid and the tail is a little solid. But we've got a nice wall thickness, I think. Let's go ahead and put some BBs in it. All right, that ought to be a pretty good sound underwater. And with a little bit of UV resin, we block that hole. Then I'll sand it down and we'll be ready to paint. All right, I'm not quite ready to paint. I did coat these guys with a really dark primer. In the meantime, I've got a couple of them in here at a really low temperature so I can fast cure that primer. So I'm going to be painting 3 of them. One of them is the one with the weight shift for long casts. The other one is the one with the little ball bearings in it, or BBs in it. And then I made one with nothing in it, just a counterweight. So that one is going to be silent. We'll have 3 to try out when we take them fishing. Pretty happy with the foil job. There's some really subtle little lines that I try to mimic with that comb in the foil, and I think it came out pretty nice. So let's go ahead and pick out our colors. Hopefully we'll have some colors in this set that'll match the lure. And I'm looking at dark green, there's black in there, there's a sort of a royal metallic blue, some other, like a little bit of a gold. We'll see. Let's open this thing up. Again, this is a paint set for airbrushes. And one thing I appreciate is that it comes in much smaller bottles, which what happens to me at least is that these 2-ounce bottles actually get old on me because I just don't use enough of it, especially colors that I don't use very often, like whites and blacks. I go through a lot, but all the other subtle colors kind of go bad. So this comes in 20 milliliter little bottles, which is about 2/3 of an ounce, and there is a lot of variety in here and a lot of bottles. That's 50 different colors in there. There's actually 42 different colors, 3 bottles of primer and 5 bottles of paint thinner. Let's see if we can get some color matching here. Starting off with the green, this looks pretty doggone close. It's an olive green, and while it doesn't have that metallic look, it definitely is about the right hue of green. So we'll leave that out. This bright blue looks like about like that. You know what? Hold on a minute. This back here are all really opaque. Then here we have some metallic colors. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And up all the way up front, we've got iridescent colors, which is even cooler. Look at that. That is a neat color. I don't know if you can see that, but really neat looking iridescent color. So it might be that I can do a little bit of layering, get the deep color down, and then hit it with a iridescent color. Let me pull this out of the box. See if this will work. All right, this is kind of fun. Here's an iridescent blue that might be better for our spot right here. I think it might be perfect. All right, let's get out the iridescent green too. And we've got a really cool looking metallic gold. Let's get that out too. We might be able to give it a little bit of a gold highlight. These colors are really cool. This is a metallic bronze. That's kind of cool. Nice. There's a black primer too. White primer and a gray primer. That's nice. We've got some thinner bottles. So out of the 50, 5 are actually thinner. We'll see if we need to actually use thinner. I'm hoping that we can spray right out of these bottles. There's a metallic yellow. That might be something I use up along this edge instead of the gold. We'll see. This is really fun to experiment with. I'm really looking forward to playing around with these things on a lure that I'm not trying to follow a scheme with. Here's a color I've never seen. This is an orange-red iridescent kind of. I don't think I've ever seen that color. And here we have fluorescent colors on the aisle behind there. Fluorescent green. Look at that. Really cool fluorescence. Nice. This is a really nice set. Man, I hope it paints good. And then the metallics are back here. So I'm going to go with the iridescent green, emerald green. I know it's a little light, but I think with a black background, which let's see, let's use their black, which is right here. And then we'll need a white for the bottom. Look at this, light purple. That's just, I guess when you have this many paints, you've got to get into the subtler colors. There's a weird pink. There's sort of a muddy looking pink here. That's kind of cool. These are all like, these kind of colors are, you would have to mix, and they're really good for fish tones because they're kind of a natural tone. Whereas like really super bright yellows, you use a little less. Here's a light gray. That's something that it's, again, not something you usually have. At least I don't have. And it's nice they give you some recommendations on PSI. So they're saying on the standard and fluorescent 25 to 30 PSI, which is usually what I use. Metallic and pearlescent always needs a little higher pressure. I don't think I ever go to 40 to 50. I usually go to 35, but we'll see what we get. And as far as thinning, they recommend that you thin it if you're going to operate at low pressure. So we're going to go ahead and try the normal pressure that I use, around 30 to 35 PSI, and hope we can get a good spray pattern and a nice clean coverage with the paint. All right, I've opened up the black one. Let's go ahead and put a few drops in here. See how it sprays without any thinner. Nice and even. All right, and I'm looking and it covers really nicely. All right, I'm gonna start off with black on top because the original lure has a green scale pattern over black. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's see how this cleans out without having to do too much cleaning. See how well it dissolves. And I gotta say, that was pretty quick. About as quick as you can expect. And we're ready for the next color. All right, I'm gonna be using this metallic gold because on the original there's a little bit of a sort of a golden hue right along the upper edge of that green paint. And for this belly area, I'm going to use white, but I've decided to go ahead and go with white primer just to make sure it covers that black really well. And I don't think I showed it on the other ones, but this thing's come sealed and not with a little piece of paper or anything. It actually has a plug, which is kind of nice because if it's a color you don't use very often, you do want to put this back on. It'll last a little longer, sealed a little better. And because there's always a little bit of overspray, I want to keep this shiny, so I'm cleaning off the overspray with like a cotton swab and some alcohol. This way I can push this edge back down closer to the belly, but it won't look like a really hard line. All right, I really like that broken up edge. Looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and put the scale pattern on. So the scale pattern is pretty small. I hope you can make that out. And I think that's the right size right there. We're gonna go with the iridescent green. And if we need to darken it a little bit, I'll go ahead and just mist it with that olive green and maybe pull it a little bit away from that really shiny or that really bright iridescent looking. But I'm looking forward to seeing what this iridescent paint looks like. Yeah, I got a feeling this iridescent color is going to be just a little too sharp for what we're trying to achieve. All right, we're going to go ahead and darken it with the olive green. And I'll try to stick to the center line on the very top. It should only take a couple of drops. All right, well, it's kind of a cool challenge to try to match a color scheme with a set of paints that I've never used before. All right, let's see what we ended up with. It looks pretty good. There's not enough contrast between the green and the black. I think I overshot the gold in between, but I'm gonna go with it. I kind of like the way it looks, so we're gonna live with it. All right, so the next thing is to replicate this little blue dot. Now I don't have a transparent blue in this set, so we'll use iridescent. See how that works. So that's what that looks like. All right, that's not bad. I'll do the other side. All right, so officially the paint job is done, but I really like having red inside the mouth or just underneath it. While the original one doesn't have it, it's kind of hard for me not to put it on there. And the set from Let's Resin has a metallic red. All right, let's give it a shot. All right, I think that's a little more subtle than I was expecting, which I kind of like. Time for some eyes. Now I'm going to put on these littler eyes because I think they look a little more like the original than the slightly larger ones that I had on a minute ago. Next time you see this, I'm going to be clear coating it. All right, well, I gotta say, I like these colors, man. Just the variety is worth the price. I can't believe how cheap these things are. I think right now on Amazon, they're running around $27 or $28. There's a special right now on them. I think normally they run $36, but even at $36, it's crazy cheap. If you're into painting lures, this is a tremendous variety. I think at the very least, you can start out with this and I think have great success with these. Look at these colors, just so many different hues. Pretty happy with that. Now it's a little hard to compete with the holographic tape on the original, but still think it looks pretty nice. So before we take these out to the lake and try them out, let's go look at what's in the Roto-Caster. I think you'll be interested. All right, let's take a look at this. I had this going for a couple of hours last night and haven't opened it. All right. Check it out. Crystal clear. So cool. And I made this because one of you guys out there suggested that I should make one where the lip is clear, just like the original. So you see, I read all the comments. All right, let's get out to the lake. We're at the lake, but it's raining. Luckily, this is just a passing shower on the day after 4th of July, and I'm gonna post this video today. All right, I'm gonna give this thing a few casts and then we'll do some underwater shots, or at least some shots of it in the water. I forgot to bring a chest mount, so I'm not gonna be able to show you how it looks retrieving it, but we'll get some shots. It's got just a really nice crisscross swimming action that looks really good because it swims just inches, maybe 3 inches below the surface. You have to go super slow to get awake, but that's doable. But I never really doubted the action on it. I knew we were gonna get just right. This is what it looks like when the weight shift balls are all the way in the back. But if you give it a quick jerk, it actually all moves forward and it levels off really nicely. Here's the action. I think you guys would agree it's got a really nice swimming action, even at a fast speed. I wanted to get a little fishing in, so I cut the underwater shots short. I fished the shoreline for a while, working around structure and a bunch of cover, but I had one eye on this cloud front that was coming in. And I was a little worried that it would start dropping lightning bolts. Alright guys, it's starting to thunder, and I don't mind rain, but I'm not a big fan of lightning. So we're gonna have to call it a day right here. Thanks for watching, everybody. And I know there's a lot of guys out there who don't like the copy your favorite lure kind of videos. I get it, that's cool. Let me know if you want to see more copies, and if you've got ideas of maybe some antique lures that really worked, that we can do that in the future. In the meantime, I've got a lot of stuff I want to get to on the channel, so stick around. There's going to be some interesting experimentation coming up. I had a few folks contact me and ask if I had any way for them to sort of give the channel some financial support, and I didn't, but I do now. I went ahead and set up a Ko-fi account, and basically you can go there and give enough to buy me a cup of coffee or whatever, or not. It's okay. So if you've wondered how to support the channel a little bit, you can go to ko-fi.com. I'll put the link in the description, and know that everything that I get from there goes directly to the lure shop. All right guys, I'll see you next time.